are a little bit fewer in number this morning because many of our women folk are off at retreat at Kingsfold this weekend. So I've had them in mind all weekend, mostly because I wish I was there, but we can keep them in mind and as they are experiencing a weekend of peace and of rest and of community together. So as some of our parents are coming back, I just wanted to mention we are looking at this passage. So Jeff and Solly read the passage on do not worry, and it's from the Sermon on the Mount. We're in this series on the Sermon on the Mount as we are in Lent. And you probably heard it's kind of a passage that focuses on anxiety and it focuses on worry. And this morning we're going to kind of get down into the weeds of this text, but also ask some pretty deep and big questions of the text. And I think it's important that we do so because we live in a time of pretty high anxiety. Even yesterday comes through my email, the Washington Post's big headline was, people are burnt out from chronic stress. It's everywhere. That's the headline. It is everywhere, and we know that. Each one of us kind of is a little bit on those front lines of an epidemic of anxiety, stress, you could say worry, but it's also veering into things about mental health and all these things, and this is a big bundle of things that's all kind of connected to this. I wanted to acknowledge as we start that I am not a counselor, and I am not a doctor, I am not a psychologist, I'm a pastor, and so I wanted to say, with all of the issues that surround anxiety, I can speak to this part of it, and it is a grounding part of it. It's the ground you're going to walk through in your life about anxiety, but it never takes the place of if you need mental health, if you need mental health help, if you need to talk to someone about anxiety, if it gets to this place where you're in dysfunction, God is caring about the whole of our lives. So I wanted to acknowledge that I am just a person who really asks a lot of questions of the text, and I also experience a lot of anxiety myself, and so I pray a lot about anxiety. And that is my only, credential for talking about this. But I think it's the same credential as we all have, is we're looking to God, and we're wondering where God is in the midst of us, even right with us, as we go through our lives with very real experiences of anxiety and stress and worry. So I wanted to say that. And I do think that God is like, yay, that's my favorite thing. Thank you for inviting me into that place with you. So with that kind of trust that he is here, that's how we're going to enter today. So as I was thinking about worry and anxiety, I thought I like to ask my kids questions about my sermons, because I usually get a funky little insight into their lives and into what it is that God is doing. So I actually asked a bunch of kids in our church, usually about 10 years old and under. I asked them 3 questions. I asked their parents to ask them. I asked them, what is worry? What do you worry about? And what helps you when you worry? And I think their answers are insightful, so I wanted to go over them. So when I asked the question, what is worry? We have these answers. So worry is hope that bad things won't happen to others or to myself or to things. I like how he made it not a negative, but a positive. It's hope that bad things won't happen. Worry is when you get scared or frightened about something. Worry is the fear of bad things happening. Worry is dread. Worry is being queasy and scared in your stomach. That's where you feel it. Worry is when you have a constant feeling that you're always thinking about something and it makes you uncomfortable. It's a bad, not a good feeling. He's naming the how it's kind of always present to you and they feel it. Worry is when you're scared to do something, but you do it anyways. Then I asked, the next slide, I asked, what do you worry about? So here are some of the things that our kids are worried about. That mom gets hurt and won't be at school pickup. Sometimes I worry about my team not winning and making the playoffs, worry about getting hurt on my bike or my skateboard, worry that bears will come when we're camping, I worry about monsters. That sounds about right. I worry about my baby brother and that he doesn't come too early and that he's okay. I worry that if I have a school quiz and I think I got a question wrong or I don't know the answer, it makes me worry. I worry when someone is mad, when my brother and sister are sad, when I have bad dreams. I worry about heights and calling mom, as I always think I will get the wrong person. Yeah, it's about right. I love how in their words, like, I worry when someone's mad, I worry about that. I worry when someone's sad, I worry about that. So here's the question I asked of what helps? What helps you when you worry? First answer was, well, nothing. Well, comfort, actually, and encouraging words help the most. Another kid said encouragement helps. Another little girl said mommy, daddy, and Molly, her sister. One kid said, I try and think about something else. When I'm doing what I need to be doing, I just focus on what I need to do and try not to think about getting a bad mark, as that just doesn't help. And one more. What I do when I worry, for the baby, I focus on the positive things, and I read about how big he is on my mom's phone. I think about positive stuff, things like I have a house, we can afford food, I'm safe, that's more important, and that calms me down. What helps this one is prayer for bad dreams, telling someone, hugging my stuffies, a warm glass of milk and cookies, and my stuffy Zebby. I don't have a stuffy Zebby, but I get that. I get the need for comfort, the need for someone to encourage me. I get the need for telling someone. That's super insightful. As soon as I tell someone what I'm worried about, it usually takes it down a little bit. All right, so that's what some of our kids are going through. And I heard back from a few parents that it was an interesting exercise to even just ask. I mean, my kids tell me what they're worried about all the time, but I rarely just stop and out of the blue say, what do you worry about? Because it kind of, usually they're telling me they're worried about something, and it's like maybe a bit of a crisis situation, like they're not going to bed because they're worried about their tooth falling out in the night while they sleep. You're like, just go to bed. But it was an opportunity to just take a minute and have a conversation about and see kind of what's going on in the inside of them. So anyways, we can take a look at those words, and now we're going to take a look at the Sermon on the Mount words, like we've been doing. Now, Jeff read those words, and what Jesus is doing in all of this teaching he's doing that we find in Matthew, he's talking about what it's like in the in-breaking realm of God. So that's what we can call the kingdom of God, but we like this active phrase, in-breaking realm. And as usual, Jesus is 0% interested in staying on the surface of life and staying in kind of the realm of rule following and how to get power and outward appearances, and he's 100% interested in kind of going to that deep place of our motivations, a place that we might not always be aware of or that we might hide, because those are the places where actual transformation in our lives happens. So we have this passage in Matthew 6 and 7, and Jesus is addressing some of these things. He's talking about money, what we do with it. He's talking about worry about our bodily needs and worrying to the distraction. And he's talking about judgment, the judgment of others, and the judgment we put onto others. And in all of these things, in what we do with money, what we do with our worry, what we do with judgment, he's kind of naming a deeper thing going on. He's naming a deeper anxiety and a deep insecurity about who we are and what we feel we have to do to get by in this world. So just to get a sense of the flow of the whole passage, on the screen, I wrote them down, but I'm just going to kind of summarize in modern language, my own words, the flow of the whole passage, just so you get a sense of what he's saying. So in Matthew 6:19 to 21, he's saying, pay attention to where you're storing your treasure. Pay attention to what's important to you, where you're putting your trust. Because wherever that is, that's actually what your whole being is going to be centered around. Verse 22 and 23, what you look at and what you focus on, how you see, is going to determine the whole state of your whole being. Verse 24, you can't devote your life and your energies to God and to money at the same time. Verse 25 to 32, this is the big section Jeff read. Worrying about your body and your provision doesn't actually make a difference. It won't actually change anything. Look at the birds and flowers. God provides for them, and they don't have to worry. God knows what humans need. Verse 33, 34, look for the inbreaking of God's living life into this world, and what you need will be found there. Chapter 7, verse 1 to 5, stop judging other people, because it doesn't help. It doesn't do anything, and it might come back to hurt you. Look inwards first. Verse 6, don't waste what is good in God's. Verse 7 and 11, 2:11. Our Father will give you what you need. Just ask honestly. He's a good giver. And finally, in verse 12, it says this, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. And this one just speaks for itself, doesn't it? In every part of your life, act and think as of others like you would like to be acted and thought about. And that's the whole law and the prophets, the words of God. That's what they're here to do. So in this passage, he's naming the things that we humans do that don't actually help. The hoarding of money, the obsessing over money, the obsessing over our bodies and what we need and getting what we need, and the judging of others. And he's naming those things as the ways we try to make our standing secure. We try to do that. We try to get all the money we can so we will be fine. We worry about how am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? How is this going to happen? So that we will be fine. We judge others. We take them down, even if it's in our own hearts, so that we will be fine. We'll be okay. If that person's down, at least I'm here, right? And what we see is that he's calling us to follow him into this inbreaking realm where we trust that God is ultimately and has always been on the side of his creation. And I think it will help us if we actually kind of take a step back and look at how deep that anxiety goes. And I think if we look at our full story, even the story of us in Scripture, we'll see this. So right all the way back into Genesis, at the core of that temptation story where the snake comes by and tempts Adam and Eve, at the core of that story is this question, did he really say that? That's how he tempts Eve that first time. Did he really say that? And just like that, with that little question, there's a persuasion to not trusting what we have heard in our hearts, not trusting that God is actually for us, that God is actually on board with us. Built into that question are 1,000 more questions, like, are you sure God has your best interest at heart? He just doesn't want you to know. He's not really on your side. Maybe you need to get some knowledge. Maybe you need to take matters into your own hands. And there's Adam and Eve thinking, oh, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should go eat that tree with the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Maybe I should do that, and then I'll be okay. We often say that the original sin was pride or disobedience, but even taking that step back, you can see that pride and disobedience, they're symptoms of something deeper, and that's a deep mistrust, a maligned trust of our Creator, which is then a deep mistrust of our own existence, our own belonging in this world. If we're not sure that the Creator's holding our whole selves, then we have to do something to secure ourselves again. And you can then see that, if that's where we start, you can see that throughout the whole scriptural story. You can see that everywhere in our culture. You can see that everywhere in history. Adam and Eve, they eat that fruit, and the first thing they do is hide. They do not trust that God is on their side, and they are scared, and they're afraid, and they're ashamed. You can see that in the next story, which is their children, Cain and Abel. And Cain is worried about his sacrifice. He's saying, my life, my work, my offering, how I offer animals, it's not good enough for God. It's not good enough. I don't know what to do to make it better. And this anger and this rage and this judgment and jealousy takes over, and he kills his brother, right? That's the story. At the core of every injustice in the Bible is one person acting to keep their money, keep their power, keep their security, to uphold their own place in the world. So whether it's Pharaoh not wanting to let the slaves go, whether it's Haman in the book of Esther, the small book in the Old Testament, and he declares a genocide on Jews because 2 Jews refused to bow to him while he was walking past. And he thought, well, you all must go, because his own place was threatened. In the New Testament, you have Herod ordering the killing of Jewish babies because his own life and purpose was threatened by the stories of a baby king. We can look in our own history. There's every World War II scholar will tell you the rise of Nazi Germany was made possible by a deep insecurity in the German people, a deep need to make things okay because they were decimated after World War I. And that is something that led to this ability to just take a whole other race of people out so that they could be secure. This deep anxiety about our own place and security and value in the world is kind of at the core of the human story. It's even baked right into our understanding of sin. Even the Greek word for sin that is used in the New Testament, it's hamartia. And it literally means missing the mark. But actually, if you look into it, it's more accurately the loss we experience from missing the mark. It's the hit we take. It's the fallout of not being able to do it ourselves. We are trying to make our way in the world, trying to shore up ourselves in the face of great unsureness. We don't know what's going to happen next. And when we are overwhelmed, we turn to things that maybe numb us or things that give us control. But we keep missing the mark, and that's a lot of our experience. So let's go back to Jesus' words here. In all of these teachings, he's calling us to follow him into an in-breaking realm where we trust that God is ultimately and has always been on the side of his creation. And to this deep anxiety that we live in, his words are, don't worry, don't worry. And maybe you've had this experience where someone says, well, just stop worrying about it. That doesn't work, does it? I have that experience. My 6-year-old has that experience when she's freaking out about something and I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't need to worry about that. It's just fine, just calm down. And she has literally said, it doesn't help me, Mom, when you say that. That's not helping. And I was like, right, it doesn't help. It doesn't help me. It literally does nothing to kind of stop those anxious neural pathways from firing, does it? And mostly it kind of actually makes it worse when someone's like, oh, just don't worry. Or you should just get yourself to a place where you don't worry. Because now I'm anxious about my inability to make myself not anxious. And it just compounds in that way. And I think that Jesus gets that about us. This carpenter prophet from 2,000 years ago, he knows that we don't change our fearful or anxious neural pathways that are telling us to try harder. We don't change those by trying harder. He actually says this, therefore, do not worry, but look at the birds. Notice them. Watch them. They will tell you what you need to know about God and you. He said, look at the flowers. Notice them. Watch them. They will tell you what you need to know about God and you. Remember that right before that, therefore, Jesus was talking about what we are seeing with our eyes. If your eyes are healthy, if they're letting in the right kind of light, if what you're focused on is good, then everything in you will be good. What you are focused on will affect you to your core. And he's saying, look at the birds and look at the flowers. And it's this passage that caused one of my seminary professors, Daryl Johnson, to ask this question: What if we heard these words in Matthew as a literal directive? So I'm asking it too. What if we heard it actually not as just nice advice, but actually as an imperative from Jesus to change what we are focusing on what we are letting into our eyes? Could he be saying, the thing I'm telling you to do when you worry is to get out of your own head and look at some birds and flowers, or rocks, or mountains, or river. Look at the animals. Look at all of what's going on around you, how life finds a way, how it flourishes and grows and thrives. All of these things are taken care of, these birds and these flowers, so will you be. Creation is not just a backdrop for human drama. We are part and a parcel of it. I made it all, and you too. Could that be what he's saying? Might a way through our deep anxiety in the world be to practice getting outside, getting out of our own heads, and stepping out of our habits of trying to figure out and make everything work? Might there be a practice of noticing what happens when you're not the one to make it happen? What happens when we're not trying so hard? Might a way through this life, might Jesus be offering a way through this life with its very legitimate cares and its deep anxieties and real things we do need to be concerned about, but might the way through be practicing where we put our focus? And I think the more I sit with this, the more I'm convinced that this actually is the invitation to us humans who are known for trying so hard and still missing the mark. There's one more little exegetical tidbit. So exegetical is a word that means like how we understand the context and the Greek and the language and all of those things. There's an exegetical tidbit in here that I think might even open this up just a tiny bit more. And right in the middle of this passage, we see that phrase, "O you of little faith." So he's saying, if this is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into the fire, Will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? And there's something about that phrase in English, whether it's been because of how it's been used or how it's worded, it veers into this kind of accusatory tone, it's diminishing tone, like, oh, if you just got more faith, it's your fault you feel this, you just need more faith. Go get some somewhere. But I'm going to offer a different reading that's actually based on the word for faith here. What's translated faith is a group of Greek words, so pistos, pistis, and pistou. And the root of these words is actually a verb that means to be persuaded. So quite literally, embedded in every instance of the word faith you read in your New Testament is a sense that it is given, it's persuaded. You are persuaded to faith. You are convinced to trust. You are given faith from God. The action and the imperative of the word faith is every time God's action. So maybe you could think of it this way. Oh, you who have not been given enough faith. Oh, you who have not been persuaded enough. And I imagine Jesus standing there looking at all these people, and he's thinking, how can I persuade you more to trust this God? I was thinking this about Jacqueline this morning and about how a newborn baby, it's not up to them to somehow muster in themselves the faith to trust that their parents are going to be there. It's the parent's job to consistently respond to the baby over and over and over and over. Every cry, every need, the parents are there to respond and hold it, and that's how trust is built. They tell you that when you have a baby. They say you have to respond when they cry. That's how your bond, that's how your trust, that's how they will know to trust you. And that's, I think, what God is doing here. The inbreaking rain is about the creator of the universe giving us faith, giving it to us, showing us again and again, even unto death, even through death, showing up in the dark after death, after the worst, and even after all of that, that's not the last word. He holds us all. So if at the beginning of our human story we were persuaded to not trust, and everything that's happened after that is missing the mark, might the embodiment of God in Jesus Christ be about giving us our trust back? Might that not be what he's all about? What we believe about God, who God is, and whether he is for us or not, whether we can trust him or not, will actually change how we are in this world. It has some pretty clear implications. So they've done these studies where they have put, neurologists do these studies where they've studied people's brains, and they collect people who say, I believe in a vengeful God. I believe that you have to do this and this or you will be judged. I believe in a God who does this. They put them in the, I actually don't know the name of it, the neuro machine that looks at your brain. Someone could help me with that. They do that, and what they find is that the people who, that's their conception of God, their amygdalas are enlarged and they're like bright like a Christmas light. They are lit up. And now the amygdala in your brain is the part of your brain that's responsible for, that's where, it's kind of your base instincts. That's where anger is housed, where your impulsiveness, where your judgment. It's kind of all those things that you do when you feel threatened. You respond to the world out of your amygdala. And that part is that's the part when you believe in a God that's kind of calculating and out to get you and not on your side. That's the part of your brain that's totally operating things at the moment. But then they found the opposite was true. So they collected people who say, no, I believe in a God of mercy, a God of grace, a God of love. And they looked at their brains, and in their brains, the frontal lobe is activated, and the amygdala is lessened. So the frontal lobe is that's where our empathy lies. That's where we learn how to step back from situations and reframe it. That's where our impulse control is housed up there, not back in the amygdala. So the parts of our brain that are working when we understand that we can trust God, are the parts that will let us treat others differently in a very real physiological way. It'll help us engage with others without feelings of threat. And so I think Jesus is offering a beautiful rewiring by looking to the goodness and the grace that's right in front of our eyes. We don't have to go very far. Look at the flowers. Look at the birds. Our Father gives good gifts, and he knows what you need. He is giving us a way to trust again, to practice trusting again. After all is said and done, in a good and merciful God, He's giving us a way to rewire our brain patterns, these neural pathways that have developed after centuries and years and even our own lives, and literally change how we live in the world. So in these words, might there be an invitation to opening our eyes to, I like to call it, the greater truth of the situation, that in God's reign in this world, He has you and you're not alone, and He will take care of you. And this world is a world of abundance and beauty, and it's not a world of scarcity. There is enough money. Maybe that's why He's telling us to share all the time. There is enough money, there is enough love, there is enough beauty to go around. And might it be that there's even goodness in the way creation works, in the way our world works? And I'm going to offer this too. Could it be that communities of people who live in this world, not out of scarcity and not out of threat, but out of this gracious, generous abundance, could those communities truly be transformed from the inside out, but then actually be changing the ways around them, like little, I don't want to say good cancer, but little ways of spreading, things that spread and change, this unanxious presence of God in communities, in Brentwood, in your neighborhood where you live? Could that be part of the rewiring of the world? I'm pretty deeply convinced that this is an invitation, this passage, to refocus our gaze and our trust, and we don't have to prove it. We don't have to prove ourselves. We don't have to make it happen. Life, salvation, faith, we don't have to make that happen. But we are invited to look around and wonder, to let our minds be made new, literally made new, and to let go of the striving. And the invitation is to trust like a kid who knows who their home is, just like Jacqueline knows who her home is. All right, let's pray.